Charles Vanover's classic book, The Best Bread Ever, is sadly out of print. In it, he describes a method for making hearth-baked bread at home. He uses a Cuisinart to knead the bread and uses a refrigerator to retard the dough to develop a deep, rich flavor. It's a quick and easy method, and it produces a bread with a springy, chewy bite and a very light, thin crust. If you don't have the book, the recipe is available online at the website listed at the end of this video. Vanover recommends the steel blade in the Cuisinart, not the dough blade. It's a half a kilogram of white unbleached flour, 500 grams, 1 teaspoon of bread machine yeast, instant rapid rise yeast, 2 teaspoons or a little shy of 2 teaspoons of salt, and 350 milliliters of water. Blend the yeast and the salt into the flour first, and then drizzle the water in slowly so the flour has a chance to absorb the water. If you go too fast, you can end up with a gloppy mess. You can see the flour starting to absorb the water. And as soon as it forms a ball, start a timer for 45 seconds of kneading. 45 seconds in the Cuisinart is equivalent to 15 or 20 minutes of hand kneading. It raises the temperature of the dough to a temperature that makes the yeast very happy but doesn't kill it. It also lets you have a highly hydrated dough. This is a 70% hydration, which is very sticky and hard to do by hand. If you do the little bit of turning out on a non-stick pad, you can be sure that you're not adding in any extra flour. You want just the amount of flour that the recipe calls for. The fact that it's so wet and slack is one of the causes of the holes and the light appearance of the bread. I do the proofing of the loaves in gallon bags with a clothespin clip on top. It keeps me from having to wash bowls at the end and makes it easy to throw in the refrigerator. The dough ferments 2 to 3 hours just at room temperature. There's no need to raise the temperature of the dough. All we're doing here is getting the yeast going, and you can see over the course of 2 hours it about doubles in size. Then there's no punching down. Just put the bags in the refrigerator and leave them really for good flavor a minimum of 12 hours, and I've certainly done it for 4 or 5 days. Forming the loaves is mostly a matter of getting the dough out of the gallon bag without punching it down, without deflating it, without losing those glorious holes. Because there's no oil in the bag and because it's not floured, you gently peel the dough away from the bag, trying to maintain as much of the rise as possible. And once it's out of the bag, just roughly form it into a log. No need to pinch it or seal it or anything. And put it into the floured banneton. These are from Pier 1. I'm not even sure if they were for baking bread, but they work very well. Once it's in the banneton, I flour it around the edge with King Arthur whole wheat white flour. It's not as powdery and dusty as white flour. And make sure that the loaf as it rises doesn't stick to the banneton. Then the loaves are put in a garbage bag and just roughly folded over for their rise, about 2 hours at room temperature. They're not going to rise all that much, but it doesn't matter. The oven is prepared with a cast iron pan full of rocks set directly on the bottom of the oven, baking stones in the middle. Preheat the oven to 475 for at least a half an hour. After the loaves have about doubled in size, but it doesn't matter, whatever they do is fine. Powder them with cornmeal so that they don't stick to the peel. I don't actually use a peel for putting these into the oven because I don't have a big flat peel like this. I just use a cookie tray. Pastry brush to brush off the excess flour. Makes a prettier loaf later on. And then slashed. I slash both directions diagonally just with a bread knife. There are all sorts of fancy knives for this, but it's not necessary. Then a plate with 6 or 7 cubes of ice is used to slide ice down into the rocks to create steam. The steam is what allows the loaves to be nice and light, the crust to be nice and light, and lets the bread expand. To keep the steam high, add ice every 5 minutes for the first 15 minutes. I flip the loaves around about halfway through to get them to bake evenly on both sides. It takes about 20 minutes to bake loaves shaped like this. After about 15 minutes, I knock the temperature of the oven down to 425 and insert a thermometer. We're looking for an internal temperature of around 205, 208. Although it would be dramatic, I don't slide the peel under the bread at the end to get the loaves out. I push them onto the peel with my hand so I don't push cornmeal down into the floor of the stove. And there we have it. People can make a fetish about eating bread right out of the oven, but in fact, I think bread is much better 20 or 30 minutes out of the oven. Thank you, Charles Van Over. It's a wonderful recipe.